So thank you, Val. Thank you for sharing a bit of your stage with me this morning. What Val's doing behind the scenes with this Vision 2020 and re-engineering the business model for the future is pretty exciting, and she's asked me to share with you a few words today just about some of the trends and some of the stuff that's going on and how that relates to where we're at with WSI. I thought a good approach this morning would be to pick up where we left off last year. And we talked about the growing complexity of digital marketing. And a number of years ago, we released this subway map to kind of help our clients understand that there's a lot of moving parts in a digital marketing strategy. And now many of you are using this image in your presentations around the world. And it's very powerful to help them understand that it's not as simple as it used to be in digital marketing. I remember in the early days, it was very difficult to explain to people what the internet was. And I'll share with you a couple of examples of that. But digital marketing has become more and more complex. Last year, we talked about demand harvesting versus demand generation. And we talked about how it used to be quite easy. I mean, back in 2001, when Google AdWords first came out, it was quite simple. We were harvesting demand. I mean, we're buying keywords, putting up a little ad, and then people clicked on it and drove traffic to the website, and it was pretty simple. Today, it's very different. If you're going to be successful with a PPC campaign, you need to have a better bidding strategy than everybody else. You need to have a whole supporting framework that works around that between call tracking and analytics and conversion architecture on the landing page and everything else that goes into that. You need to be working with a guru, somebody like WSI Paid Search or the Reach local team, but you can't just get away with average campaigns anymore because it's a very competitive world. And so we talked about how a lot of dollars in digital marketing are moving into Facebook. And since that time, I guess the rest of the world has agreed with us because since we last met at last convention, Facebook's stock is up by over 70%. They will be one of the first trillion-dollar companies in the history of the planet. But demand generation is very different than demand harvesting because it's more like traditional marketing because we're not just giving people exactly what they asked for, like PPC. We have to lure them towards our offering, kind of like a fish in a lure. We got to capture their attention and then bring them in towards our offering. They're much further up in the funnel. We've got to nurture them through that. It's psychology driven. We've got to hook them with our headlines, our copy, our offers, our graphics. The audience segmentation is critical. What we can do on Facebook today with audience segmentation is incredible, beyond what most people can believe. I mean, the whole Cambridge Analytica thing is representative of the level of data that is out there on all of us. But whether we're using custom audiences or lookalike audiences, we can do very sophisticated things on Facebook, but it's hard to do, right? When you crack the code on Facebook, you can it's like a license to print money for your client, but it's hard to do. We've got to have a whole full funnel strategy. So the reality is that digital marketing is more complex than it's ever been. But the other part of that is that represents opportunity for us. And I'll explain what I mean by that in a few minutes. But I'd like to just talk about a couple of the trends that are adding to the complexity in our digital world today. You know, when we talk about machine learning and artificial intelligence, these are the buzzwords out today. Some of you remember a few years ago, the big buzzword was big data, right? And it was because our devices and our applications are spinning off so much data. In fact, today, in a few days, we generate more data than the history of the world prior to the year 2000, generated since inception. So vast amounts of data. What artificial intelligence and machine learning does is it applies computing power to that data, and it allows us to do incredible things. It's changing the way the world of medicine is working, education, the financial industry, forensics. I mean, almost every industry is being transformed in some way by artificial intelligence. But in our world, how is that working? How are we using artificial intelligence in digital marketing? Well, if you're using, how is Google applying that? So where's big data in a PPC campaign? In a PPC campaign, we're generating massive amounts of data in our Google Analytics, right? We've got all the data between the device they're using, the browser, the operating system, the time of day, the location, the keywords they search for, all their interaction with the copy and the campaigns. All that's buried in this pile of massive data in our Google Analytics, right? If we can tell Google what a good lead looks like, if we can tell Google what a good client looks like, Google can take that and apply computing power to all that data and actually find the patterns, the bid patterns that actually resulted in that client becoming a lead or a client. If you're working with WSI paid search, you probably are already working with Google's artificial intelligence, and I believe ReachLocal is as well. So it's a very powerful application of how we can have a competitive advantage if we know how to use this. But again, it's not simple stuff. Predictive profiling. You know, why did HubSpot recently buy out Chemv, a machine learning company? Because the HubSpot platform or SharpSpring or platforms like that are amassing massive amounts of data. If we can apply machine learning to that data and artificial intelligence, we can lead score. We can tell the sales team which leads are most likely to turn into customers. We can define which traffic is most likely to turn into leads. And we can adjust our campaigns on the fly using this artificial intelligence. Again, it's going to change the game in the future. Bots, artificial intelligence bots. You know, if you believe Dharmesh Shah, one of the founders, co-founders of HubSpot, he believes that bots may replace websites. You see, we go onto the internet and we search on websites to get information, right? But if we can anticipate the needs of what people are looking for and serve them up that information, then we don't really need websites anymore. And now that's a little ways off, but some of you are already using ChatPath, WSI's partnership with that platform. We're hearing amazing results about the conversion impact it's having for many of your clients. We're using it on our own site, and we've seen a huge impact in lead generation and conversion. So if you just go to the WSI site and use our little chatbot, there's artificial intelligence baked into that, integrated with SMS. It's a very powerful platform. We're beginning to use this technology. But bots are not just something that sit on websites. Bots also sit in our pocket. There's Siri, Amazon Alexa, Google Home, Cortana. These are all bots in devices that in many ways we're getting our web data, our internet data, without even going on the web anymore, right? Through devices like this. How will that change how digital marketing is done? Now, Google's, the vast majority, over 90% of their profit still comes from paid search. So Google's not going to abandon their advertising model. So there will be huge opportunity for all of us, but it's going to change the way marketing is done. Virtual reality and augmented reality. Virtual reality in and of itself may and most likely will have an impact, a transformational impact on society beyond what the World Wide Web did. You know, explaining transformational technologies is very difficult. I remember in the early days, it was difficult to explain the internet. In fact, we couldn't explain it on the internet or even advertise on the internet because nobody was there. So we used to buy round-the-world tickets. British Airways had a ticket at the time where you could stop as many times as you wanted as long as you kept going east. And so we would go from city to city, country to country, explaining to business people how the internet was going to change the world. And I remember, you know, presenting to rooms of business people, and I would try to explain it, and I'd say, how many of you had a fax number on your business card 10 years ago? And there'd be almost no hands. And then I would say to them, how many of you have a fax number on your business card today? And almost every hand in the room would go up. And then I said, 5 years from now, all of us will have an email address on our business card. And they'd stare back at me with blank stares, total confusion, like deer in the headlights. It was just too confusing. They didn't understand. If I said to you 10 years ago that today we would, or sometime in the future, we would have these hypnosis devices that we would hold in our hands. Remember TV used to talk about how the hypnotist would hypnotize people swinging an object in front of their eyes? If I told you that sometime in the future we would all carry around a hypnosis device and look at it for multiple hours every day. If I told you that families would get together around the dinner table and they'd all sit there, spending time together, and they'd sit there staring into their hand in their hypnosis device. The other day I was sitting in a Starbucks, a mother and daughter were sitting together, sharing some, mother-daughter time, having a coffee, both staring into their hypnosis device. I was in a cab, saw a cop walking down the street, staring into his hand. Well, in the airport, walking through the airport, 5 people, workers sitting on a bench, half of them security people, just not talking to each other, just staring into their hand, right? And of course, I'm talking about our smartphones and how that has changed our human behavior. It's so compelling that we interact differently with each other than we used to. What if we could actually go into that world? Not just look at it, not just read it, but literally enter that world. Can you imagine how compelling that would be, how addictive that would be, how transformational that would be on society and human behavior? How many people have seen the movie Ready Player One? Okay, I gotta tell you, if you have not seen that movie, whether it's from a digital marketing perspective or a human psychology or just from a sociological perspective, you need to see that movie. It was done, it's currently out right now, it's Steven Spielberg's movie. I was on a conference call a couple of months ago with the head of HTC in China. They work very closely with Steven Spielberg in the creation of this movie. And Steven Spielberg insisted that everything in this movie was either feasible with today's technology or was predictably going to be in place in the next number of years. He wanted this movie to be prophetic. He wanted people to, 10 years from now, look back at this movie and say, Steven said it would be like this, and it is. When you see this movie, it'll blow your mind in terms of what's possible and the world we're going into. And of course, it's going to affect everything, but it'll affect digital marketing. You know, if I'm walking down the street in Times Square and I'm looking at all of the buildings and the advertisements, one building alone generates $25 million a year in advertising just off the billboards on that building. Who's going to own the virtual buildings in our virtual reality world? How are we going to advertise differently on all these digital properties within this virtual reality world? Okay, I can't answer the question. I can tell you it's going to be exciting we'll be part of it. We know that much. Augmented reality is a little bit different. It's probably going to hit us a lot sooner. In fact, it already has. Pokemon Go, right? Took the world by storm. It's about layering information or visuals over top of reality. And today, we use augmented reality by looking into our devices. In the future, it'll be smart glasses. And I don't mean long future, I'm talking very soon. Smart glasses, smart contact lenses, and it'll just layer additional information on our existing world. So when we're walking down the street, we'll be able to look at stores or business establishments, we'll be able to see their ratings. We'll be able to read their reviews just by looking at the storefront door. We'll be able to walk through the grocery store or the shopping mall and look at products and have a whole additional level of information layered on top. We'll be sitting on the subway or the train, we'll look at a person across the aisle, we'll know everything about them. We'll see their profile, we'll see their Facebook profile, their LinkedIn, we'll know what their interests are, we'll know who they are. Okay? A little bit creepy, okay, but that's the world we're going into. Who's going to help clients optimize that? Right? Our world's going to change, going to get increasingly complex. The last thing I'll just leave you with in terms of technology changes is distributed ledger. This is going to be massively transformational. We've all probably heard of Bitcoin and blockchain. Okay, these are just uses of distributed ledger. What distributed ledger is today when we interact with the digital world, we go through a platform. Okay, we go through a platform, a company, an intermediary. We have to connect with something in order to connect with the other side. And so if we look at examples of this, if we're using banks, right? To transact money, financial transactions, we need to go through a bank. If we want to send money, we're going to go through Western Union. Services, I mean, Uber all they're doing is connecting a rider and a driver. It's a platform, but they're in the middle. Somebody's in the middle. Somebody has the database, somebody has the trust, somebody has the ability to transact. That's the way our digital world works today. Goods move through a supply chain with many intermediaries with data all along the way. Advertising, Google and Facebook, they're basically selling our eyeballs. But advertisers have to go through Google, they have to go through Facebook in order to connect with our eyeballs, okay? That's the way it works today. But in the future, with blockchain or distributed ledger, there is no central intermediary. We're all part of that grid together. So to give you some examples, blockchain is obviously a type of distributed ledger. It's probably the first manifestation of distributed ledger. A subset of that is using cryptocurrency. So one of the ways we can use a blockchain or a distributed ledger is to transact currency. Bitcoin is only one of over 1,500 cryptocurrencies. So is Bitcoin going to be the product in the end? Who knows? Is it going to be Ethereum, which is probably number 2 right now? But is it even going to be blockchain? Blockchain is just one type of a distributed ledger. If you've been following the technology space over the last number of months, many, and I might even say most analysts believe that this new organization, Hashgraph, or Hedera, who's launched Hashgraph, is going to eclipse blockchain, okay? So we don't know exactly where it's going to end up, but blockchain is going to be massively transformational, or distributed ledger. So what are the implications of this? Hugely disruptive. Airbnb, we don't need them anymore. Airbnb is just connecting people who have a house with people who want to stay. We don't need a platform anymore. We don't need banks and credit cards. I wouldn't want to be Visa. I wouldn't want to be a bank. I wouldn't want to be MasterCard. There's going to be no need for an intermediary anymore. There's the concept of one person in the center having the trust and the ability to transact is no longer relevant. Open advertising platforms will emerge, and this is because of microtransactions. So let me give you an example. Today, most of the content on the web is all free, unless it's the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, and we'll pay $20 or $30 a month for that. But I can't pay 1 cent to read an article. I can't pay 5 cents to watch a how-to video on YouTube because we don't have the ability to do microtransactions today. Blockchain is going to change all that, right? Cryptocurrency is going to change all that. In fact, it will completely change the economic model of the web. There's going to be an explosion in journalism. You know, if I could spend 2 cents to read a great article, would I be willing to? Yeah. I'm not going to go online and give my credit card and sign up for the Wall Street Journal, but I'll pay 2 cents to watch that, to read that article. You know, my daughter was watching YouTube the other night, and there's, you know, that's kind of what today's generation does. And I said to her, would you spend 5 cents to watch that episode? She didn't know what I was talking about at first. She's scratching, how would I spend 5? No, but would you spend 5 cents if you could just to watch that? Yeah, 5 cents. I watch this all the time. It's one of my favorite YouTube channels, okay? Would you watch 5 cents, pay 5 cents to watch a how-to video if it solved your problem? Of course. Totally transforms the economic model of the web, and the Googles and the YouTubes and everybody in the world that is in the advertising business has to, their model's upended. In fact, there will be new platforms that emerge that are open advertising platforms where Google is no longer selling our eyeballs. Facebook is no longer selling our eyeballs. We are selling our eyeballs. We are actually charging advertisers to advertise to us. And if we're now actually getting paid to be advertised to, we're now willing to give more information because we're making money on it. This whole thing about privacy, I'll give up some of my privacy, maybe, depending on how much you're going to pay for it. So the reality is that as advertisers and as digital marketers, this will be hugely transformational. So the bottom line is that the world is becoming increasingly complex continually, but here's the other side of the equation. Customers are becoming increasingly more demanding. Our customers, right? And the reality is that what do they want? They want growth and they want profitability. And if we can't deliver it to them, then they churn. We get client churn. Do you have client churn in your business? Right? At the end of the day, are we delivering value? We talked about this quote by Tim O'Reilly. He said, the key to success in today's world is to deliver more value than we capture. Like, to deliver more value than we're charging for. That's the key to success. This guy's a titan or one of the founders of Silicon Valley. So I guess the question to ask ourselves is, are we creating value for our clients? Do you have churn in your business? Because churn is the first signal that you're not creating value. Do you have customers who can afford to leave you? Like, the problem is that when they're leaving you, you have to ask yourself, why did you allow them to be able to? You know, how can they afford to leave you? Can you think of a customer in your business that can't afford to leave you because it's almost like you're delivering so much value, they're so addicted to what you're doing in their business, the leads, the growth that's happening, that they can't leave you. They're addicted to what you offer. So that's really the question. That's the place we need to go. You know, if we could identify, you know, what if there was a way for us to identify those golden clients within the WSI network? And this is part of Val's vision of 2020. What if there was a way for us to find that 1 or 2% of our most successful clients in the WSI network who literally can't afford to leave us, whose business is exploding because of us, right? And you're hearing about, you know, I have to say, either people were still hung over from Jack's party last night or it was early morning, but when Val asked that question and said, how many of you are tuned in to that Making a Difference segment on the open forum, this is your opportunity to literally find out where the 24-karat clients are within WSI. And basically, well, I mean, here's the bottom line. If we have a client, those 1 or 2% clients that are just crushing it, why wouldn't we double down on delivering results for other clients just like them? We've done all that heavy work. So this is part of Val's vision. We're bringing in a team of some of the biggest brains out there, some of the Cornell consulting team. And for those of you outside the country, Cornell is kind of like the Harvard of the East. And we had one of them in Top Guns. But we're bringing this team in to go through our suppliers and our entire network to find those 24-karat clients, those 1 or 2% top clients who are creating so much value for it, because we've already developed the bid strategy, the funnel, all the conversion architecture, the offers, the headlines, the creative, all that already exists. So why reinvent the wheel starting with a new client where you're scratching your head going, okay, tell me about your business. Let me try to understand your problems. Let me try to think about how I can apply our technology to this. And we're trying to reinvent it from scratch every time. Why not just take that one client where we're crushing it for them and take that same campaign and go to another client just like it? That is our competitive advantage. Guess what? Who else can do that in the world? How about nobody? Who else has a global footprint like us? How about nobody, right? So this is our unique competitive advantage. And admittedly, we haven't really been leveraging it in the past. And this is what is so exciting about Val's 2020 vision, is because that's where we end up. And so let me give you an example. What if you were talking to Jack Porter Smith and you found out that he has a client that keeps cranking up their budget every month, now over $7,000 a month? It's a plastic surgeon. He's basically transforming this guy's life because of the business he's driving in the door. What if you knew the consultant was basically, by hooking them up, is taking home over $1,000 a month just consistently, and Jack's doing the work, right? Do you think it might make sense to go approach the other plastic surgeons in your market? There's tens of thousands of them all across the country, right? Why would you try to reinvent the wheel? Now, if you were tuned into the open forum and you were listening to the Make a Difference segment, and you actually saw this because it was presented on one of those segments, you'd go, wow, Jack, we need to talk, because I got plastic surgeons in my market. What if you were listening to another one of those open forums and you found out that Jack has a dental campaign that's crushing it, not just for one client, for a whole raft of dental clients? Jack can just sign up a dental client for you and like that be driving business in their door to the extent that they now need to hire additional dental assistants consistently. So don't even start using our services unless you've got room, extra chairs, or room to grow your business. Now, there's over 200,000 dentists in the US alone, right? Why would we be scratching our head trying to figure out a solution when Jack already has a turnkey solution? And that's just Jack. I'm just talking about Jack. I'm not talking about all of our other suppliers and all of our other ICs across the network. What about if you're talking to another IC, you're sitting across the table from them, and they said, yeah, I'm doing this amazing program with Google. Do you realize that Google gives $10,000 away to every nonprofit? $10,000, not a year, $10,000 a month in free advertising if you're a nonprofit. What if you were talking to that IC who says, yeah, I target nonprofits, and we've developed this amazing strategy that drives all kinds of new donors in their door, and I just call up nonprofits and say, hey, by the way, did you know Google's giving you $10,000 a month and you're flushing it down the toilet? I'll get together with you and show you how to use that $10,000 a month from Google. and he charges $2,000 a month to manage it, right? Gives half to the supplier, half to Google, or sorry, half to the supplier and half to in his own pocket, right? You get $1,000 a month recurring just for signing up a nonprofit. I don't know, is there many nonprofits in the market? You know, how about 1.5 million in the US alone, right? Do you think you might want to find out who his supplier is, who has this campaign that can drive donors in the door of any nonprofit, right? Why reinvent the wheel? That complexity has already been, we've cracked the code on it. So the whole vision going forward is to be able to identify, work with our top consultants, our top suppliers, and find those 24-karat clients so that we can crush it for similar clients around the world just like them. So as I said, we're super excited about where this is going and the vision on the road ahead. You know, the other day in Top Guns, a couple of days ago, Neil Lappy was talking about Jack Welch in this quote. Jack Welch, of course, former GE CEO, considered one of the greatest CEOs of all time. And Jack says, if you don't have a competitive advantage, don't compete. And I think Neil said, get the hell out. But I think Jack, the way Jack put it is, if you don't have a competitive advantage, don't compete. And it makes sense. Why would we be going out trying to sell commoditized solutions, competing with everyone else when we can actually crush it in certain segments, right? And I'll just leave you with this last quote, which I think is even more valuable, and it's by a guy named Scott Galloway, who wrote the book The Four, and it's really about how Google, Facebook, Amazon, and Apple have become the most powerful organizations on the planet almost out of nowhere. But in that book, Scott says, and I think this is, to me, stuck out as the strongest quote, he said, there's never been a time in the history of the world where it's been better to be remarkable. There's never been a better time in the history of the world to be remarkable. But he also said, there's never been a worse time in the history of the world to be ordinary. And I think that's the reality we live in. Our clients won't allow us to be ordinary. Otherwise, they're going to leave us. There's lots of ordinary solutions out there. We can't afford to be ordinary. So what I would say is, let's commit to exceeding their expectations. Let's commit to transforming their businesses and changing their lives as we transform those businesses. And let's commit to being remarkable. Thank you.